Thank you. You'll have to bear with me. I'm going to read all this through again because we may have people in the gallery that weren't here for the first meeting. So I would like to start by welcoming everyone to the extraordinary meeting and to take the opportunity to remind everyone present that I expect you to treat all members of the Council with respect. Members of the public who are observing the meeting should not interrupt in any way. As with the previous meeting, the extraordinary meeting is being filmed for publication on the Council's website. If you have any queries regarding this, please speak to one of the Council's staff after the meeting. Are there any apologies for absence? Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Move on to item 3. We now move to the single item of business for this extraordinary meeting, the motion on waste and recycling arrangements. I will ask for the motion to be proposed and seconded in the normal way. We will then take any amendments in the order in which they were received. We will then move to the debate, and the usual rules of debate will apply. I will call each member who is asked to speak on this item in turn. When there are no more speakers, we will move to the votes. Councillor McLean, please move the motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for allowing me to propose this Conservative Group motion to Council. We, the Conservative Group, have called this extraordinary Council meeting tonight to discuss and debate issues relating to the service failure of the refuse and recycling arrangements provided by Veolia since the 1st of October 2018. Madam Mayor, for months the Labour administration has tried to ignore and frustrate all attempts to discuss the performance of Veolia. Well, it is time for them to own up and be honest with local residents. The unwanted Willie skip-in scheme rollout has been chaotic. Thousands of collections of rubbish and recycling have been missed. Veolia has failed to keep the streets clean. Indeed, Madam Mayor, you could argue that Veolia has become the #1 fly-tipping culprit in Merton. In the ward that I represent, Cannon Hill, just last week, litter and council plastic bags were left for days on Martin Way, an all too regular experience for residents all across the borough. As such, is it any wonder that in a recent survey presented to the Sustainable Community Scrutiny Panel that the percentage of residents satisfied with street cleanliness is a disgracefully low 57%? Madam Mayor, we of course know what the Cabinet member's response will be, that the rollout could have been handled more efficiently, but that things are getting better, that he is taking a firm line with Veolia to improve their performance. Time and time again, the same line. Frankly, it is not good enough, nor is it believable. You only need to walk the streets of Merton to see the mess and lack of improvement. Madam Mayor, it is undeniable that there is poor political leadership from this Labour administration, and it starts right at the top with the leader of the council and flows throughout the cabinet. Madam Mayor, combine that poor political leadership with a severe lack of political courage, then you have the roadmap to mismanagement and chaos. Madam Mayor, this Labour administration is reluctant to hold Veolia to account because to do so would mean admitting their failure. Failure in the contract negotiation and provider selection. Failure in the implementation of the waste collection service. Failure to adequately enforce the contract. Madam Mayor, the Cabinet member has acted like an ostrich, head in the sand, hoping it will just all go away. Well, it won't, and it is not going to, and certainly not until this Labour administration stops rewarding failure. Madam Mayor, Merton residents want an honest answer about how much money Merton Council has fined Veolia. They want the step-in clause in the Veolia contract fully activated, allowing for additional private contractors to clean the streets, their remuneration deducted from the payment to Veolia. They deserve a council administration that puts their interests first, a Conservative administration. Madam Mayor, I beg to propose the motion.
Thank you. This, I believe, has been seconded by Councillor Holden.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm seconding this Conservative group motion tonight. We call on the Cabinet to get a grip on Veolia and look for ways to extricate Merton Council from this disastrous contract at the earliest opportunity. The whole process with Veolia has been beset by problems from its very inception, and the continuing failure of this administration has led to lots of anger and frustration from the residents of Merton, causing the rise of the Mucky Merton hashtag. In my Hillside ward, we have received thousands of emails on this subject, and it was the number one topic by a country mile in 2018. Examples include, when is a block of flats considered for communal waste collection? It's a very simple question. I have examples on Edge Hill, Darlington Road and Denmark Avenue where the council has left residents in limbo because they couldn't or wouldn't get this simple question answered. This was clearly due to a lack of information and knowledge transfer from the council to Veolia, resulting in residents falling through the cracks with often up to 2 to 3 months of missed collections. So another example, no bins are delivered at all, and requested larger bins not arriving for nearly 4 months after your introduction of your new system. Shame. I've got examples of this from residents on Midmore Road, Denmark Road and Thornton Hill. We must ask why. Why did the council and Veolia take so long to do this? The reason, I suspect, is the total lack of management of change procedures, lack of functioning IT systems between the council and Veolia. Yeah. The contract management has been wholly inadequate, and it's obvious Veolia are running rings around this council. Yeah. A third example, assessment of property and road types. Veolia claimed to assess property types and issue the right type of waste system accordingly. But as we saw during the rollout, many properties were given the wrong information. We had maisonettes being treated as communal flats and tiny bedsits being treated as large houses, often resulting in no bins for the maisonettes, but a veritable sea of bins outside of some of the properties on roads such as Alexander Road and Bernard Gardens. Horrible. There were also whole roads where wheelie bins blockade the pavements because of these false assessments, and an example of that is Woodside. How did Veolia do their assessments, and why did they not listen to us? We asked for this information so that we could help you get it right first time and on time. Madam Mayor, I've highlighted a few examples of the failure of this council. This whole saga is ultimately down to one single reason: woeful leadership by the Cabinet member, Councillor Brunt, and his leader, Councillor Ann Britters. Councillor Brunt has been absent, unresponsive, and shown no public intention to get this sorted. His predecessor, the former Councillor Ross Garrod, he at least tried, and he did so visibly, but you don't. Shame. I even have it on good authority that you ignore your own backbenchers when they have concerns. I've been told by people. They contact us on the quiet occasionally via residents as well. Anyway, so whilst the council leader thinks it's right and proper to insult people at the community forum, as he did at the Wimbledon Community Forum last September, it's as a result of their constant failure that we have called this meeting tonight, and I call on them to give up their special responsibility allowances, as outlined by Councillor Williams earlier. In fact, I will be bolder and ask that you both resign and let someone else in your group have a go. You have been sat here too long to do any good that you have been doing. Depart, I say, and let us have done with you. In the name of God, go.
We have two amendments. Councillor Fairclough, do you move the first amendment, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to propose the Liberal Democrat amendment to this motion and give some idea of the reasons behind it. It's certainly an extraordinary motion, Madam Mayor, and there's an even more extraordinary amendment coming up, I see, from the Labour group. However, the motion as it's written, it is, in our opinion, just a missed opportunity. So, for those, especially in the public gallery, who may not be able to see the text, it frames an extensive debate, but limits itself to essentially one action, which is doing nothing until 2024, and then just swapping contractors. Madam Mayor, Councillors McLean and Holden have talked tonight about step-in procedures and contractual deductions. But because of the way the motion is written, sadly none of those things will happen, even if the motion passes. So, assuming this is unintentional, if you'll allow me the pun, Madam Mayor, it's perhaps a rubbish motion in more way than one. A pun. Allow me the pun. But I find when I talk to residents, they don't want more debate. They don't want special meetings within meetings or after meetings, before meetings, whatever. They want action. Whoever the contractor is, whether it's Veolia or anybody else, Merton and the South London Waste Partnership need to get a stronger handle on ensuring the contractor meets the agreed standards. In my own ward, as I'm sure in yours, I've received hundreds of complaints about this. There are those who want wheelie bins but can't get them no matter how many times they ask. There are those whose gardens are too small for wheelie bins but they can't get the replacement bags. Flats above shops near the Apostles whose rubbish goes uncollected every week. A resident for whom the computer not only said no but said the recycling was collected on Christmas Day when it hadn't been collected at all. But it's not just bins and recycling, it's street cleaning. Long streets like the Kingston Road, where leaves at one end can't be cleaned up because someone from Veolia needs to assess the whole road to see if it falls below grade B. The mess caused by pigeons from hell under railway bridges that we can't get cleaned, circumstances beyond our control, and repeat fly chips, but no long-term solutions. Systems that don't learn which litter bins need collecting more regularly. So Merton's officers are pretty much unfailingly polite, and we've heard tonight that there's going to be more neighbourhood client officers, but some of my casework takes 10s, 20s of emails and calls because the officers simply can't get Veolia to do anything. So we need to look and learn what works, and that's what our amendment is about. Get better at being a commissioning council rather than a council that provides services directly, and our amendment would enable that to happen, and we'll hope that all sides of the chamber will support that. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
I believe Councillor Kohler, you're seconding.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Veolia contract is clearly not working. We all know that. All our inboxes are full of complaints from our residents. We know there's an issue. We heard from Suzanne Gale about the bins which are never put back as they're meant to be in my street as well. They're always left out. We heard from Dan Good about the litter, the problem with litter in so many streets. There are clear problems. We heard that from many of our residents today, and have done it day in and day out on our emails. But I don't want to enter into the Yarbu politics that the Tories are entering into. This idea that you've done it all wrong, and if we were in power, all the decisions would be easy. We know full well there are huge cuts in local government funding, and councils have had to make decisions to go with places like Veolia. We all know that the Tories in Kingston, the Lib Debs in Sutton, and Labour here and in Croydon signed up with Veolia. To pretend that we'd have done it differently at that point is just unfair and untrue, and exactly the type of politics that gets us a bad name with the electors. However, what we need to do is work with Veolia and improve things. What the Tories are offering us are 6 years of doing nothing, 6 years giving a notice of termination. What will that do to Veolia's work? What will that do to their commitment to the borough? We need to work with Veolia. In a small way, that's what we've tried doing in Trinity. I arranged a meeting with Veolia and the council officers. I invited James and Hayley along. And Hayley, who attended, I think would agree with me. We had a good discussion with them about what was going wrong. And in the last couple of weeks, they've started addressing those issues. Hayden's Road is better than it was a couple of months ago. What I'm saying to the council is, why don't you start having that debate at a higher level with them and getting this done? If we can start moving things forward in Trinity, you can start moving forward things in the borough. It's not perfect in Trinity by any means. As Julian Holliday said, detritus, leaves, the mud that's creating is still a huge problem and needs to be addressed. But we must work with Veolia and learn how to do this better. We can't simply try the Yarbu politics of blaming them for all the mistakes and saying we've got all the answers. It's simplistic, and it makes our voters have a total lack of faith in us. And lastly, to coin a phrase, let's be tough on litter and tough on the causes of litter. Let's also use the enforcement officers from Kingsland to actually go after fly tippers. I own a bar in Westminster and we have 2 hours to put out our litter, our refuse. If we miss that, because the wrong side of that 2 hours, we invariably get a fine. They go straight into the bags, they look for the source of the address, and they issue a fixed penalty notice. Why aren't our enforcement officers doing that? This is what you need to do. You've also got to deal with people littering and fly tipping, and we don't have the political will to do that at the moment. Thank you. Please vote for our amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Corner. Move on to the Labour amendment. Councillor Brunt to move the amendment, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I rise to propose an amendment to the resolution proposed by the Conservative councillors opposite. The original resolution is overwhelmingly negative, which, given the fortunes and divisions nationally and locally, is understandable. Labour, on the other hand, is the party of optimism, collaboration and problem solving. Merton, in partnership with Croydon, Sutton and Kingston, has been said, signed up to this contract, a cross-party agreement. All parties agreed to it. The Conservative councillors opposite clearly didn't read the memo from Conservative Central Office that sent out after Michael Gove's spoke powerfully at the Veolia site in South London before Christmas, setting challenging targets for recycling and waste minimisation, which we take seriously. In the spirit of collaboration, I wrote to Michael Gove, welcoming his call for simplification of recycling nationally and instruction to local authorities to collect food waste, something which the much lauded Wandsworth Council resolutely refuses to do. On behalf of the Cabinet, councillors and residents, I meet regularly with Veolia's management and challenge them and hold them to account. Sometimes these conversations are uncomfortable for Veolia, as I challenge them when they let us down. I give positive feedback when it's due, but do not shy away from insisting on improvement. There were undoubtedly flaws in the distribution of wheelie bins at the beginning, with 10% of wheelie bins not delivered, despite their assurance that they would be delivered on time. This had a knock-on effect, for which they have apologised to the local residents. It had a knock-on effect on the food caddies and recycled boxes. And we've worked together with Veolia to put that right. And I'm pleased to say that 28,000 additional recycle boxes and food caddies have been delivered since October. This is on top of the in the region of 125,000-130,000 wheelie bins that were delivered to people's homes. So I'm not complacent, and I'm still on the case with the elusive box lids. Don't worry. All of these efforts by council officers, Veolia, and not least the willingness of our residents has meant that the target of 45% recycling is going to be exceeded. In fact, early indications are that we're already ahead of it for the first 3 months. This contrasts again with this much lauded Wandsworth, which has set a target of 22.3% for recycling, less than half ours. And yet they still haven't achieved that. They're at 22%. South London Waste Partnership could teach them a lesson, and maybe we should invite them to join it. Of course, the contract at the centre of this debate is not only about collection of waste and recycling, it's all about street sweeping and dealing with fly tipping. Split bags were a regular feature of our streets. That has largely gone. The introduction of wheelie bins, which although some say are unpopular, many are saying to us when we canvass that they're really pleased with them. And as I said in my earlier answer, we're recruiting more staff to deal with the performance management of a street sweeping. Fly tipping is the scourge of our society at the moment. It's growing across the country. We are working with Veolia to try and resolve this, and it's a problem that all of us have a role to play in. Officers, Veolia, the scrutiny panel, and councillors and residents. Together, we can work together to improve that. But the government doesn't seem to be taking these, any tangible steps to support us on fly tipping, even though it's across the country. I've introduced the workshops I mentioned earlier with councillors across all wards to meet, and the Merton Park was the one I forgot earlier from the Friday collection. That will be coming up in the next couple of weeks. But this initiative demonstrates that we are keen to find solutions, not as the Tories want to do, just walk away from a contract. I may not be the most ambitious councillor on the chamber tonight, as I'm not seeking any position of leadership. I am certainly not making a leadership pitch, but when it comes to waste and recycling, I'm one of the most passionate here. I so move the resolution, and this is not about running away, this is about making a contract work.
Thank you. The amendment seconder is Councillor Ottawa.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I speak today as the Scrutiny Chair of Sustainable Communities, not necessarily to defend Veolia, but to talk about how the Scrutiny Panel, a cross-party panel, hold Veolia to account. Since becoming chair of the panel in May, the panel has met 4 times. In those times, Veolia's performance has been scrutinised. Veolia was called in June, giving the panel the opportunity to scrutinise the communication to residents ahead of the rollout of the programme before it went live in October. Now, for 4 months on, since the scheme was introduced, it seems appropriate that Veolia be called in to have their performance scrutinised, which to me seems the correct thing to do. So I'm pleased to report that Veolia will be coming before the panel on 26 February, and the panel and residents across the borough will have an opportunity to scrutinise their performance. You know, social media is a wonderful tool when used positively, but all too often it seems to me to be used to either bully or to be used negatively, especially by those who hide behind the names like Merton and Mabel Fonge, not prepared to put their heads above the parapet and be counted. I guess it goes with the territory if you're in public office, but it still does not mean it is very pleasant or right. I personally, for one, respect those who will give me constructive criticism, which I much prefer. I remember when I first came onto the council to be part of the new Labour administration in 2010, taking over from the Tory administration. Merton was known in the media as a dirty borough. So you will agree things could not be allowed to continue the way they were. Something had to change. It seems to me that the council was throwing good money after bad, foxes and cats having a field day, ripping black bags, creating more work for the waste services team, having to clear up after them on collection days, not to mention the increased cost incurred. It was just not sustainable, and any responsible administration could not continue to deliver the service the way it was. With funding from central government being slashed and trying to protect key services, especially for the vulnerable in our society, to continue to deliver waste service, which was not working, was not an option. Let me enlighten you with a few facts which justify the change. Lib Dem-run Sutton Council, who introduced a frequency change to their waste collection and food collection waste collection about 6 months ago, have seen a 50% increase in their recycling figures, while Tory-run Wandsworth's recycling figures are only 20%, and they do not have wheeled bins, not to mention the state of their streets in Wandsworth, which are quite appalling. By comparison, I am pleased to say that in just 3 months, Merton Council's food and general recycling rates have increased to 45%, while the waste to landfill has reduced considerably, saving the council millions, which surely must be a good thing. So I am proud to be part of an administration that has not only taken the courageous and bold step to introduce wheelie bins in an effort to change behaviour, improve its recycling figures, and reduce what goes to landfill, enabling the council to channel that saving to continue protecting the vulnerable in Merton. While the implementation of any new programme there will inevitably have teething problems, while it isn't perfect, I know the council officers are working hard with Veolia to deliver a good service to its residents after all its only
please,
4
Councillor.
months. So
We now move to the debate. The following have indicated that they wish to speak. Councillor Ellison.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is an extraordinary meeting, and as the councillor responsible for council resources, I have to say, and the cost incurred from additional meetings, I have to say that this is an extraordinary misuse of council resources. To hold this meeting as a hustings for the next leader of the Conservative Party is an extraordinary waste of everybody's time, forcing us to sit here so all of you can have your say. This is the first extraordinary meeting in an extraordinarily long time. And the last one, 17 years ago, was on a cross-party basis and essential for the running of the council. This type of thing should not become a routine, especially to highlight issues that could very easily have been raised an hour ago at a meeting that was about sustainable communities. We did not call an extraordinary meeting when they were the country's dirtiest borough. Under the Conservatives, they were the country's dirtiest borough. We didn't call an extraordinary meeting. We dealt with it. We got elected. So why now, when it's improving, when the whole service is improving, is this meeting taking place? The only thing that's extraordinary happening now is that there is a Conservative leadership election taking place. If they want to talk about things that are truly extraordinary, bring a meeting about the extraordinary cuts to the services of this council as a result of 50% being taken away by your government. Have an extraordinary meeting about that. Come and do that next time.
Councillor Moulton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I may be retiring shortly as the leader of my group, but I won't be ceasing to represent residents of Wimbledon Park, and I will continue to hold this shambles of a Labour administration to account for their failings until our streets are cleaned up, bins emptied and fly tipping curtailed. I've got photographs here in my phone of the rubbish left lying on the pavement for 2.5 weeks at the top of my street near Arthur Road shopping parade, and it was only miraculously cleared up this morning. Do we really need an extraordinary meeting to make things happen? I can't go out of my house without being accosted by upset residents, and my resident Catherine W. sums up the frustration of us all when she wrote, and I quote, "It is unacceptable for Veolia to A, miss a presented collection by claiming it wasn't presented, B, fail to recollect when reported by phone, and C, failed to collect the extra cardboard presented to the blue bin on a dry day with no risk of contamination because there wasn't space left in that bin because of A and B above." And Catherine continues, "This has happened to me twice in 8 weeks. Previously, it had happened twice in 2 years. After sending numerous emails, I'm still in a situation where the onus is on me to send you photos, but no action is actually taken to collect before the next fortnightly collection is due, and yet Veolia carries on being paid for this atrocious service." And she finishes, "Perhaps the number of disputed missed collections should be part of the contract monitoring and lead to financial penalties, even if email correspondence such as this gets householders nowhere in their attempts to get their rubbish collected on the promised days." And she concludes, "A shocking service, and I am really fed up. The temptation now to not bother recycling on the promised days." Madam Mayor, enough is enough. Residents have got into action, and we demand it on this summer.
Councillor Quilliam, do you wish to speak?
Yes. Well, I was going to say I won't take too much time, but I don't have too much time. I think we've heard many stories already of the issues that are all across the borough on this. We have our own in West Barnes. We have missing bins on Heath Drive that took weeks. We have missing bin on Cavendish Avenue that the residents still not received. We have missing bins. We have missed collections. We have litter not collected regularly from places like Bushy Mansions and all over the ward. We also have several reports of Veolia themselves spreading rubbish through a lack of care in collections. And one of the reasons for the wheelie bins was supposed to be to reduce rubbish in the streets from torn bin bags. It's not working. So I hesitate to carry on because I think we'll all be repeating these stories ad infinitum. But I had a members' inquiry from October It was about getting shared bins in a cul-de-sac. It wasn't complicated. I had a response 2 weeks ago. And it feels if we're going to have to, as councillors, do Veolia's job for them in chasing this stuff, the least we should expect is for them to give us a prompt reply. So with that, I will leave it, but I think we'll hear more of these stories as we go on. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Macaulay.
I am a proud Cabinet Member for Community Engagement and Equalities, and it gives me great pleasure standing here this evening. In fact, I'm not happy to be here, but we have no option but to definitely defend the administration in what we do. Last night, if people were watching the TV, they will see that the three main priorities on all the boroughs, both in London and outer London, are children's schools and families, public health, and community safety. If you didn't watch the BBC News, those were the three concerns of residents. It is quite disturbing that we are spending a lot of time debating an issue of waste tonight, on an issue which has been caused by the drastic cuts that the government has made to local authorities all over the country. And there has been a great impact on the services which we provide for our residents. London has seen a big increase in knife crime, and the biggest change will be that of public order offences and possession of weapons. And this is in category 1. Due to the increase of knife crime last year and the fast increase which we have seen this year, following on, the Mayor of London has implemented a summit in June where all 32 boroughs have been working to complete a borough-based knife crime plan. Merton's plan is very much in partnership and is also been submitted and shared to cabinet leads for community safety and the Safer and Stronger Executive Board. Ongoing work will now be monitored at the borough's location board. The work will be monitored by the Community Safety Partnership and is designed to look at everything from prevention, education through enforcement. The Safer Streets program has 12-session program to reduce the risk of knife crime in London, and the aims of Safer Streets program will be implemented. I do feel that we should concentrate on issues which are affecting everybody. Let's get back to basics and discuss important.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dean.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I thought this council was responsible for waste and rubbish, but clearly they're not. I'm sorry if you have to actually do the job you're paid for. I know you'd rather at 10:05 on a full council meeting be tucking into a couple of Campari and sodas with recyclable bottles. But, you know, this is the job you're meant to do. If you don't take it seriously, then just don't be here. I actually feel, Madam Mayor, that I'm in one of those Politburo plenaries, because the utter rubbish that I've heard tonight. Do you really think that any councillor's had a phone call from somebody saying how happy they are with their wheelie bins? I can tell you. No, I haven't. Not an email, not a text. No. Yeah, you talk utter rubbish and it's a waste, believe me. I can tell you the day that wheelie bins were meant to turn up, I had 81 complaints about problems. Now, as councillors, we are here to represent residents. I accept that you don't want to do that tonight, you'd rather be doing something else, but we are here taking this seriously. This is a job that has to be done. And frankly, it should be done. We said this was a waste of time. We said Veolia was a waste of time. Talk to your mates in Croydon. They tell us the truth about Veolia. Go and have a chat. Turn up to your next SLWP meeting and tell the truth, because you are not telling the truth. SLWP, secretive, anti-democratic, and that organisation should be thrown out of this borough. There is no democracy. You do not do your job. If you're not interested, get out. But what we want to do is have clean streets. We want a litter-free area. We don't want your rubbish bins. And please, let's start taking things that matter to this council seriously.
Thank you. Councillor Southgate.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, we find ourselves in the not altogether comfortable position of announcing we're going to be abstaining this evening on everything. So, with regard to the Conservative motion, well, we don't do name-calling politics. We never have required cabinet members to fall on their swords or forego their allowances. We never have done that, and we're not going to start now. But the Labour amendment, as we see it, is frankly just too weak. It is not going to put the frighteners up Veolia. We need to confront them, really, with the real possibility that the contract could be terminated early within the legal constraints that the contract allows. So we have to hang tough with them. Within the minute remaining to me, I did want to use this time to place on record our appreciation of the valiant efforts of our neighbourhood client officers who liaise with Veolia. They do their best for us. They were rightly recognised as finalists in the Team of the Year and the Staff Excellence Awards. They go the extra mile, and yet so often they seem to be banging their heads against the wall, don't they? Their frustration is palpable in our email exchanges. One here, when waste bags had not been cleared from the memorial cross in front of St Mary's Church on Remembrance Sunday. Please accept our apologies for the distress caused by this. It is disappointing for all concerned that the ongoing issue of the bags ruined the event. And there's more like that. So it's not working as it should. I think we have to get a lot tougher with Veolia. We have to look at the business model. Is it really working? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gritton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, street cleaning services and the waste refuse collection are the very core service that this council needs to be giving to its residents. It's at the heart of our community, and if you get it wrong, you bring down the whole amenity of the community and you impact the well-being of its residents, which is exactly what this cabinet seems happy to do. Madam Mayor, I may need to remind Councillor Allison of some of the numbers because he seems pretty generous with his chequebook when it comes to writing cheques out of more than £500,000 every single month to Veolia. It's a £6 to £7 million contract a year, and over the course of a contract duration, it's £150 million of residents' taxpayers' money that he's planning to throw down the drain and pay Veolia, come what may, irrespective of whether or not they turn up and actually empty our bins. And that's atrocious, Madam Mayor. That's absolutely atrocious. This cabinet needs to do a lot better than that. I don't think he's ever... I may need to remind them, Madam Mayor, that contract management is an essential part of the job of what this council and cabinet need to be doing. And, Madam Mayor, I don't know if Councillor Brunt and the cabinet have ever seen the contract now I mention it. Here it is, Madam Mayor, 500 pages of it. I suspect it's the very first time they've even seen a copy. If they have read it, Madam Mayor, I suspect they didn't take any of it in, but if he did read it, he'll see that it's full of clauses allowing this council a proper guarantee. Clean streets, no litter on the streets, no leaves, no detritus, not the 8 inches of sludge that we see on Revelstoke Road and Ashton Grove and Wimbledon Park when you come out of your door in autumn, when residents have never seen it so bad for 20 years. Madam Mayor, their contract's got every written guarantee you could possibly want. Wheelie bins delivered within 5 days when you call for them, miscollection sorted within 24 hours, no litter bins to be overflowing, and if they are, then they have to be emptied within 2 hours. There are a few easy steps, Madam Mayor, that this council could take, but it needs to vote and start paying a step-in contractor and taking that money off the £500,000 to pay Veolia every single month. They need to step up, read the contract, and actually make it work for this borough. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Bowes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, the Conservatives have called this extraordinary meeting, so let me tell them about something extraordinary that's happening in my portfolio. As has already been said this evening, the Council has seen a dramatic reduction in its government funding over the past 9 years. This has meant we have had to find significant savings across the Council, including in our waste contracts. Madam Mayor, in finding these savings, this administration has been committed to using the July principles, protecting the budgets that look after our most vulnerable residents in children's and adult social services as far as possible. And further pressure, Madam Mayor, was put on these budgets when the administration committed significant growth to adult social care in 2017, in response to the increasing demand the service was experiencing. Madam Mayor, we're having to do this because the Conservative government, paralysed by Brexit and as divided over its own leadership as the group opposite us, is doing absolutely nothing to address the crisis in adult social care funding, despite having promised reform for the past 2 years. Madam Mayor, that is extraordinary, and if anything was to warrant an extraordinary meeting, perhaps that should have been it. We could have even asked the Member of Parliament for Wimbledon, who serves in the department, to come and explain himself. Just today, Madam Mayor, Age UK published a report that estimates over 54,000 people have died whilst waiting for social care reform since the government promised its Green Paper 2 years ago. That is an absolute scandal, Madam Mayor, and in the government's ongoing inaction, it is the council that has to act, and it is the council's budget that will suffer, unfortunately, often to the detriment of other areas, to ensure we protect our vulnerable residents.
Councillor Ormerod.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Since becoming a councillor last year, I have to say that so much of my time has been dealing with rubbish. That is rubbish in its true form, as in residents' emails, calls and visits to in regard to refuse collections, state of the streets, increase in foxes, and so on. I challenge any councillor to disagree with this. On a daily basis, we see filth on the roads due to leaves not being collected by the Veolia contract, new small forests growing out of drains, which have become clogged. And when it rains, well, that is a completely different story, particularly when walking from A to B, as living in Merton has now made ownership of Wellingtons a wardrobe necessity. My residents in Trinity Ward have one main item that they consider they pay their council tax for, and that is to have their rubbish removed on time and completely taken. To be able to walk down the streets and not bear witness or stumble onto litter or avoid the foxes that reside in the area, because foxes know that Merton is the place to come for dinner. I've heard on so many occasions that wheelie bins will help the situation, and now we're in a period of getting used to the bins, apparently, but this leaves one key fact out of the equation. Refuse collection in the state of the streets in Trinity and across Merton just isn't done anywhere near as well as it should be. The contract simply hasn't worked. The situation is dire and depressing, and I'd also like to add embarrassing. There is no shame in saying it just hasn't worked out. Let's reach that conclusion, seek to remove Veolia at the earliest opportunity, and make Merton residents' lives better.
Councillor Broad.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Here in Merton, we're protecting our vital services by taking difficult decisions, yes, including those that affect our waste collections and street cleanliness. There's been a lot of talk here tonight about disgraceful street cleanliness and waste collection, but you know what I think is a real disgrace? Child poverty. In this borough alone, there are 11,000 children living in poverty. And if austerity is supposed to be over now, why isn't it over for them? Councils of all political persuasions recognise this as an extraordinary situation that threatens our very social fabric. And because this Tory government is a disgrace, and Tories in this chamber deliberately ignore the effects of their own party's failures, by chronically underfunding local authorities, the Tories force all good authorities to take difficult decisions across the board. But the Tories in this forum only seem to care when it affects their streets, not those most vulnerable that we care for. As in children's services, we are not complacent and always strive to be better, but please, some context is required. And I may have to fight with my Cabinet Member for Adult Social Care over who deserves the next extraordinary meeting most. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bembo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. a shame in every ward is a little with some fly tipping on a daily basis on Kings Road, Merton High Street, Merton Road and Morden Road. People in my ward complain every day on missing collection, fly tipping, gadgets, and on delivered bins and street cleaning. Why should we spend hours taking pictures and reporting online when nothing is being done for days? In a special reporting many times, nothing is done, just a bird of fly tipping. This is normal in every ward, and it's a real embarrassment. When is Merton Labour they start taking a responsibility to sort out this mess? This party will always be known as the Mucky Merton Party, or be a rubbish party. So, pardon the pun. This is becoming a Shakespearean play. A comedy of errors. You with your contract with Verluna, you have failed every single promise with your agreement. And sadly, your tarnish the Merton Council reputation. It's a real tragedy. Finally, I must tell you all this. This councillor branch, he lives in my ward. I wonder, does he have a way to walk through our dirty streets? But he's ready, I think. But I'm urging you, be ruthless with Verluna and start taking action. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Alan Brittis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Now, in any democracy, opposition has a great role to play, but this opposition opposes everything and everyone and ends up all over the place with the real prospect of a fifth Tory opposition leader since 2010. That's one every 2 years. Tonight, they're excelling themselves with a beauty pageant to see who speaks best in advance of their selection meeting on Monday, results screened live on Tuesday. Tonight we have a party political use of a council meeting by the opposition to serve their own narrow self-interest to secure the future of their divided local party. Remind you of anything? Let us also remind ourselves that the South London Waste Partnership is about all parties taking the opportunity to harmonise services across 4 London boroughs. We've done this with Veolia to deliver significant cost savings as a result of Tory austerity to spend on things like new libraries and new leisure centres. More importantly, the savings allow us to continue to help adults and children in our care. I would have thought that you would have welcomed all that. Of course, it is not Veolia who fly tip or who mess our streets. According to the government's own DEFRA website, there's been a near 40% increase in fly tipping in the country. We must all be working flat out, as our amendment states, to give Merton residents the service that they deserve. And finally, Madam Mayor, to a message that arrived in my inbox this morning from residents from the ward of the outgoing Tory leader, Wimbledon Park. And it reads as follows. We have on many occasions over the past years had to complain about the lack of street cleaning in Stewart Road. You know the very road. However, over the last few weeks, there's been a marked improvement both in Stewart Road and the surrounding areas of Arthur Road. These are now outstanding examples of what can be achieved. and achieve a cleaner Merton. We will, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Andrew Howard, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, if this was a game of just a minute, or should I say just 2 minutes, not to trivialise the impassioned issues being raised on the other side of this chamber, I'd have to say that if Nicholas Parsons was sitting in your chair, he would have upheld about 4 claims for deviation from the subject on the card. The subject on the card is Veolia. The subject on the card is waste management. The subject on the card is the failures of the Labour Party in this matter. Not national issues, not leadership battles, nothing. That's rather swept away the first part of my speech, so I'll just go straight on to use a line from Jeremy Corbyn, which is to say, as he would at PMQs, I've had a letter from Betty. Well, it's actually a series of emails, a saga that stretches from last October all the way through to the end of January, some 4 months after Wheelie Bin Day. Betty, we shall call her, had contacted Merton in advance of the change to suggest that larger common wheelie bins be provided to her block of 5 flats, as 10 regular wheelie bins could not be accommodated, and a research officer duly agreed that 4 such bins would indeed be supplied, so not to worry. However, on the 14th of October, Betty emails me for help. No rubbish has been collected for the flats for 3 weeks. Veolia had delivered some bins, but the unwanted phalanx of 10 regular bins which were unusable. I'll skip some steps for brevity, but suffice to say that the correct bins were not delivered until the 24th of January. Over the intervening period, Betty continuously raised a formal complaint and wrote to the leader opposite. I quote, "This is appalling service, as it is now nearly 8 weeks since Veolia took over the contract, and this is not what we expect as ratepayers." But the most telling verdict comes in a reply from a manager here at Merton. It begins, "My sincere apologies for the problems you are experiencing. I understand you had the wrong bins delivered in September. These were removed due to lack of space, but the correct bin solution was not delivered despite my colleague reminding and requesting on 4 occasions for the bin solution to be delivered by our waste collection contractor." And another officer.
Time, please.
Time indeed, sir. Time you went.
Councillor Cooper Mabaya, please. Let's get on with the debate. Councillor Cooper Mabaya.
Madam Mayor, it was interesting to learn that the Tories had called an extraordinary meeting on waste collection. Street cleaning is important, and that is why we are working hard in improving the way our rubbish and recycling are collected and our streets are cleaned. We all have a responsibility to expose the small percentage of residents who choose to fly tip rather than dispose of their rubbish appropriately. Madam Mayor, let me tell you about some of the extraordinary things that are happening in my department as a result of the cuts this Tory government is forcing upon us, and have in turn forced us to cut back on waste collection services. Schools are having to cut back on the provision of experiences that enrich the curriculum. For example, school trips that we all remember when we were much younger. The provision of specialists for particular topic areas. There is a reduction in the frequency of renewing resources, and this sadly includes books and vital equipment. Madam Mayor, the Tories have called this extraordinary meeting, but let me tell you about the extraordinary efforts of our head teachers, governors, and children. 100% of our secondary schools are good and outstanding. 93% of our schools are rated, all schools are rated good or better, and 95% of our pupils are being educated in schools rated good or better. We will, as an authority, continue to educate our children in the traditional subjects, but also we must increase our efforts in educating them about increasing recycling rates and the importance of sending less to landfill. We are committed to working with Veolia on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Crowe, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The general situation in Rains Park is no different to that in the rest of mucky Merton, except that Rains Park has a prize-winning high street in which the residents take great pride. Alas, all is not pretty and all is not perfect, because at the eastern end of the high street, we have what is officially called a neighbourhood recycling centre. An overflowing rubbish dump would be a more accurate description, and it is a blight on the area. I have with me a photograph of this site taken on Saturday. This photograph shows bags of rubbish are stacked on top of and around the waste bins. The date of this photograph is not really relevant because this is a recurring situation. The simple fact is that the bins attract rubbish, and the most obvious problem is that Veolia cannot organise sufficient collections from the site. However, Madam Mayor, if we inquire into the whys and wherefores afflicting this benighted recycling centre, we see that the overflowing rubbish is part of the same catalogue of mismanagement and incompetence that gives us mucky Merton, namely the requirement to store different types of rubbish at home for a fortnight, new wheelie bins not being delivered, and inadequate provisions for flats and bins not emptied on designated collection days. Faced with these many problems, we begin to understand why Veolia cannot organise sufficient regular collections from the Rains Park Recycling Centre. Madam Mayor, there is one inescapable conclusion: this Labour administration and Veolia are not good enough. Thank you.
Councillor Welton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and giving me the opportunity to address this council at this ungodly hour. Tonight has been a night where we've had an extraordinary council called just to hear a Tory leadership hustings, and that's the reason that we're here at this late hour. I have to say, I've been a member of the South London Waste Partnership for the past 2 years. I've worked alongside Councillor Brunt on that body, alongside a number of other councils, including Kingston, Sutton and Croydon, which at various times have been controlled by Conservatives and Liberal Democrats. We're in extraordinarily difficult times here as a council, Madam Mayor. We've had to make massive savings. A third of our budget has gone since 2010. I have been a cabinet member in 3 portfolios since that time. We've had to make some very difficult choices, many difficult decisions, and that has been due to the cuts enforced on us by the Conservative government. Madam Mayor, things are getting better, as my colleague Councillor Brunt outlined. We are seeing our recycling figures dramatically increasing. This is actually something to be welcomed because they are delivering savings. The more we recycle, the more we save. I also believe that wheelie bins have made a considerable difference. Yes, there was issues in terms of the rollout of those wheelie bins, but I see myself there is a lot less split bags in my ward, and it's something that my residents have welcomed and called for throughout my time, and it was the Labour administration that delivered wheelie bins in this borough. Yes. I ask Council tonight to support this reasonable amendment and actually support the amendment put down in our name. Colleagues, let's have faith in us. We're getting there and things are getting better. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Janice Howard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm sure all is clean and dandy in Mitcham and Morden wards. However, I'm going to keep this speech brief, focus on Wimbledon Park ward, on the matter of Veolia's failings. I've got 2 emails received from one of my residents on the matter of Christmas trees. Let's cast our mind back to Christmas. Mrs. D emailed on the 24th of January. You won't believe it, but the Christmas trees are still sitting on the pavement outside our houses at number 37 and 35. Number 39 has a larger front garden, so theirs sits inside the gate. I haven't checked the rest of the street, but this now warrants an official complaint. I have told them a week ago that I will put the tree on the pavement as it's been sitting outside my front door, blocking it since January the 5th. Since then, I spoke to complaints twice, telling them that their promise of the trees being picked up as soon as possible has been ignored. I feel most frustrated about the fact that my complaints are met with shoulder shrugging and vague promises which never materialise. Nobody seems to take responsibility. I think this is time for stronger measures now. There must be something the council can do about Veolia's cavalier attitude. Mrs D emailed on the 27th of January. It's getting stranger by the minute. Yesterday, only my tree was removed, whilst they left trees on both sides, even the one at number 35, which was left on the pavement right next to mine. Others in the road are still there. What a waste of time and money to only remove one tree. This is just one example of many emails received daily on the failure of Veolia to deliver on their contract, and action to invoke penalties needs to be taken. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Draper.
Madam Mayor, when we were out campaigning in Lower Morden at the last election, we found that every street name sign had been fly-posted by the Mucky Merton campaign. Well, politics is full of self-fulfilling prophecies, but a campaign that wants to prove that Merton is mucky so much that it makes Merton mucky itself, well, shocking. Madam Mayor, that's extraordinary. Now, I tell you what else is extraordinary, though, Madam Mayor. Our libraries, our prize-winning libraries, they're run from this building by just 4 people. Extraordinary. Our parks and open spaces, all 110 of them, 4 people. Extraordinary. Leisure services, including our extraordinary new leisure centre, 3 people. Extraordinary. Adult education, 2 people. Extraordinary. Heritage, all our extraordinary heritage, 1 person. Extraordinary. Obviously, these figures don't include the people staffing our libraries or cutting our grass, but they represent the leanest set of leisure and culture officers in London, and they achieve extraordinary things. And they're all non-statutory. That means that under Tory austerity rules, they're disposable. That means that every day I come to this place to try to protect them against further ruinous Tory cuts. I reckon it's extraordinary that we've been able to keep things going at all, let alone make the extraordinary successes that our officers achieve. Imagine how much more we could do if we could fund our services to the level that they deserve. And then, imagine, because this is true, a Tory group who, instead of helping us, actively support people who fly post and litter our borough. Shocking and extraordinary, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Barlow.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I spoke in my question earlier, which seems some time ago now, about confusion amongst our residents who simply don't understand what Labour are trying to achieve with this policy. What I hadn't expected to learn was that members opposite also don't understand their own policy. The Cabinet member responsible for this shambles shared with colleagues that he had a pair of trainers in the bottom of his wheelie bin that had not been collected since Christmas. Whilst residents will not be surprised by this and will have had their own similar experiences, I'd say to Councillor Brunt that having looked on the Council's own website tonight, shoes, tied in pairs, along with textiles, should be put in one tied plastic carrier bag beside or on top of your bins or boxes. No more than one bag per collection, only normal-sized carrier bags, no cushions, no duvets, no curtains. Residents will sympathise with members in their plight, and accept that we all have to play our part in cleaning up our borough. But residents also have lives to lead. They do not need to spend their time emailing their councillors, speaking to officers, sitting in the gallery late into the night, or fishing out their trainers from the bottom of their bin. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Stringer, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And it's important that we're discussing this issue because our residents love living here and they want to ensure that they are living in a clean and pleasant surroundings. Contrary to what some of the people have been saying, our residents have broadly welcomed the move to wheelie bins, despite the initial trepidation. We've talked about the issues with the initial embedding in, but once they've got going, when we ask people on the doorstep, they particularly welcome the fact that the new collection service aims to reduce landfill and increase recycling rates. It's heartening to be able to report back to them this is already happening. Residents are responding to the new service by changing their behaviour for the better. And in the residential streets away from the main roads, the effective introduction of the new service has led to a notable reduction in litter caused by bin bags. Christmas trees have not been an issue in Abbey. I've had no complaints about that. On the other hand, our ward does have some particular issues with residents not acting so civic-mindedly, with fly tipping and dumping of rubbish bags on the main roads. And it's great to hear about what the council is doing more to educate and address these issues, and I urge us all to work more to tackle those. The attacks on my colleagues by the Tories are hard to swallow. I know how hard my colleagues are working to try and improve the lives of the residents in this borough, under increasingly difficult circumstances thanks to the devastating government cuts. Meanwhile, the Tories do nothing but grandstand and seek publicity, rather than trying to actually address the issues. My residents recognise that this council is working hard to protect services for vulnerable people from the savage cuts going on elsewhere, but rightly they demand high-quality universal services, and I have nothing but respect for my colleagues working to achieve this difficult balance. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Omar Bush.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to take this opportunity to highlight the failings of this Labour administration, who can be seen in denial tonight, and its mismanagement of Veolia, which can be viewed by all on Mucky Merton, by us all here tonight via Twitter. I'm sure all of you are busy tonight tweeting away. The contract with Veolia highlighting how this Labour administration is for the few and not the many, with residents across Merton and in my ward, Rains Park, suffering for the rubbish decision made by this Labour administration. And excuse the pun. Madam Mayor, this is an administration that has failed to run a waste collection service and then outsourced it to Veolia, whose disastrous performance has led to piles of rubbish rotting on our streets. And it's our residents that are suffering. We have bins that have not been collected in Rains Park for months, and it's this administration and Veolia that are doing absolutely nothing and want to continue doing nothing. Madam Mayor, fly tipping is not only a serious concern in my ward, but in all wards across Merton. The amount of fly tipping occurring on a weekly basis is not acceptable for the residents in Merton. This can be seen in my ward, Taunton Avenue, where fly tipping takes place on a weekly occurrence. Madam Mayor, I believe that our residents will feel that continuing with this Labour administration and Veolia is unsustainable for our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mark Kenny.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mucky Merton, what is it? As the MP for Wimbledon referred to it in a recent TV interview, one must assume it is simply a front for members of the Conservative Party. Presumably they spend their time trying to be Don McCullin wannabes, scouring the highways and byways of Merton and posting images of torn, discarded copies of the 2017 and 2018 Conservative manifestos and faded copies of their window poster, "No wheelie bins here." What we do not see, unlike the great Don McCullin, are any images of the homeless huddled in the doorways of Merton shops, the ever-increasing number of vulnerable residents visiting Merton food banks, and the anguish, fury and almost uncontrollable despair of my eldest son, who, when he was having a psychotic episode, was told there were no beds available for psychiatric patients in London. A disgrace. My colleague, Councillor Brunt and others have outlined the success and the shortcomings of Veolia. From a personal point of view, I would disagree with Councillor McLean and say that Cannon Hill is a cleaner place since the advent of wheelie bins. Door knocking in the ward recently, I received a number of compliments about the bins and how they had improved the tidiness in the neighbourhood. I admit, however, there is a downside to the contract. My colleague, Councillor McCabe, is warning us about forlorn, frustrated, emaciated feral foxes sloping around the streets of Merton, trying desperately to prise open the wheelie bins and food caddies. Like the Conservative Party, I fear they may become an endangered species in parts of Merton. Potentially good news, however. I hear that Fox News may soon be broadcasting an appeal for the foxes, on behalf, obviously, of Foxfam. In conclusion, Madam Mayor, I urge all members to support the Labour amendment. Rip up this Conservative motion and throw it in the blue wheelie bin.
Time, please. Councillor Williams.
Well, Madam Mayor, it's really good to hear a Labour backbencher. We've heard from two of them, but mostly from the Cabinet members who don't want to talk about Veolia and don't want to talk about failures. It's quite nice to talk after Councillor Allison because I can put him right on a couple of things. Firstly, it's not even 10:47 yet, which was the time the last council meeting ended. When you talk about the extraordinary cost of bringing an extraordinary meeting, 3 pieces of paper, we're all here now having talked about this issue for an hour and a quarter, and it's still not past the time we finished our last council meeting. So get a grip of reality. What is also extraordinary is that Labour don't seem to understand the depth of feeling across the borough at the way in which the council have ignored them. Frankly, it is beyond it's beyond belief, and I'm glad that this meeting is now being webcast so they can see exactly how, in your responses, particularly from the front benches, you have totally ignored the concerns that members of the public have been raising with us. The other thing that I was glad to speak after Councillor Allison, he talks about, well, we haven't had a meeting like this for 17 years. Well, he's wrong. He's wrong on many things. We had one to talk about the Ambassador Theatre Group and how Labour gave that away to a private company and tried to do most of that in confidentiality. Madam Mayor, the Labour administration need to understand the strength of feeling on this issue, and that's why we called this meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Fraser, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I couldn't wait to talk, actually. In 2006, I wasn't in this chamber and didn't even know I'd be here. But I know the Conservatives were in charge. But I also put myself up to be a councillor then. Why? The place was an absolute tip. It really was, especially in Longthornton Ward, where I am a councillor. I believe that this extraordinary meeting has been called because you are just totally jealous. You've been sitting over there for a long time, getting lower and lower in numbers. I remember when Councillor Dean told us we were just a minority party because we were 28, you were 27. And the other councillors decided to vote with you so that we wouldn't get wheelie bins. You didn't realize the importance of wheelie bins, and you didn't get it, and now you're really jealous that we've got it. In 2014, we had a landslide victory. We had 36 votes, and you are going down, and you're not really happy about that. But in spite of all of that, we are working quite hard to make things work for our residents. And as a lecturer, I would actually say to you, what you need to do is assess, review, evaluate, and communicate, not just with ourselves, but with our residents. I was out today delivering papers, right? And I think that if we did a lot more than that, we would actually get somewhere, rather than turn this into a political Brexit. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Holmes.
Very easy going number 14 in my group on the same subject. So I thought to talk about something a bit different, I thought I'd talk about my mother. So Madam Mayor, my mother has been a Merton resident all her life, and she has got used to a situation where she has worked out that if the waiting time on the phone system to say that her rubbish has not been collected. If it's 15 minutes or more, then she doesn't wait. If it's 15 minutes or less, then she does wait. She's also got used to trying to work out whether the person who promises that it's going to be done and promises it's going to be collected is actually going to come through for her and is really going to get it collected. And she's actually got used to that. Madam Mayor, what's important, and some other speakers have said it this evening, is that people like my mother, who really aren't very interested in politics and who don't have very strong feelings either way, have become interested and have become much more passionate about it because of this subject. And what I really don't think the Labour group understand is the strength of feeling. And people who are normally just fairly easygoing and feel fairly lucky to live in this borough have been really motivated by this issue. And I don't really think that's understood. Now, Madam Mayor, I'm going to prove this evening that I'm not a candidate for leader by actually being a little bit friendlier to Councillor Brunt. I believe that Councillor Brunt is a man of goodwill. I believe he's working very hard. I think he is very dedicated. And in previous meetings, I've been really quite impressed with his openness. But the point is, as other speakers have said, it's not working. And real leadership is actually not to tie yourselves to Veolia and not take the blame for what they're doing, but real leadership is to say, we're in charge, it's not working, they're not delivering, and we're going to have to stop it, and we're going to have to take a different route. And that's what I would urge Councillor Brunt and Councillor Annan Brittas and the administration to do tonight, is don't tie yourselves.
Time, please. Councillor Dehaney, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It seems to me that I am the only one, or very few, which see some improvement in Viola's performance. Now, I'm from the Graveney ward, and it's noted for a lot of fly tips and dirty streets or whatever. And in the past few weeks, when I walk around, there's noticeable improvement in the cleanliness of the streets, and fly tips are being picked up earlier than normal. The green bags that Viola normally leaves when the sweepers, sweep up the streets, are being picked up the following day. I know this because I walk around to check, and the green bags are not there the following day after they sweep up the streets. Now, I'm not saying that everything is to everybody's satisfaction, by no means, but some residents who complain about dirty streets and fly tips and now begin to say that they are seeing some small improvements. Fly tips are picked up regularly these days, and the sweepers, the green bags, as I say, are also picked up the following day. So they are responding. Viola is responding to our complaints, and the service is gradually improving. But of course, we know why we have Veolia, and we can't say this too often. It is because of the cuts we're experiencing from the government, which has forced us into a situation where we have to get Veolia to save money to spend on elderly care and children's services. We're actively working with Veolia. You may not believe it, but we are actively working with Veolia to improve services, and we are constantly reminding them of their responsibilities under the contract. Yes, Madam Mayor, the contract is not working up to our satisfaction, but everybody's will see that there are gradual improvements, and give us a few more months or whatever, you will see changes.
Councillor Lateef.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't intend to spend the next 2 minutes telling the administration how bad Viola are, because we've been hearing that for the past hour and a quarter. Madam Mayor, I want to spend a minute just sharing my personal experience with Viola last December. It all started quite innocently with a missed collection from our communal bin store. No one thought anything of it until, guess what? 2 weeks later, another missed collection. Things were getting quite bad in our bin store, so the church complained, the neighbours complained, I complained with my residence hat on, and we even sent progress reports and progress photos. Unfortunately, the only response we managed to get from Viola was a third missed collection. I finally decided to put my councillor hat on and I complained officially, which did actually work. And Viola came and they cleared the bin store. And it took 2 men almost half an hour to clear the bin store. Madam Mayor, I want to end by saying 3 things. Firstly, residents should not have to be an elected councillor to get their rubbish cleaned. Yeah. Secondly, Viola should stop their policy of why collect rubbish once every 2 weeks when we can collect once every 6 weeks and make lots more money. Yeah. And finally, if Viola, who are a French company, if they behave like this in France, there'd be riots on the streets by now, and several Viola trucks would have been overturned and set on fire. Thank you.
Councillor Chung, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, may I start by saying that in respect of Veolia, all is not well. I'll be honest. More still needs to be done. Generally speaking, however, my experience is that I have found them to be favorable. When there has been a problem and I bring it to their attention, it may not be right away, but they do come along and sort it out. Right? Much has improved since from the previous times. This is including fly tips. Let's be honest about this. Please bear in mind that this is a joint contract with 4 boroughs of different political persuasions. Please bear that in mind, because when you criticize us, you might actually be criticizing yourself. Please bear in mind that we are having to work with the austerity policy of this government, and we know what that brings to a number of our citizens. We are having to operate in an environment of cuts to government funding, and this means shrinking resources. These are not the best conditions, but we are forced into this position, and in spite of this, with determination, we will make a success of it. We must work critically and constructively and continue to hold Viola to account, and we will. Finally, I would like to give a special thanks to our hard-working cabinet member. You want to take away their allowances. I mean, this is very mean and small-minded of you. Mike Brunt has done a lot of good work in this, and you will continue to do so, and we need to actually confront him.
Thank you. Councillor Adam Bush, please.
Is the mic on? Can I start by echoing all my colleagues' points from earlier and endorsing what Councillor Stephen Crow and Councillor Omar Bush had spoken about in Rains Park. It is simply discourteous, rude, or maybe both, to the taxpayers that a basic service that they pay for cannot be delivered. In Rains Park, we have examples of fly tipping happening on a weekly basis. We have bins still not being collected. We have bins still not being delivered. And this must stop. Councillor Brunt spoke eloquently earlier about things are getting better. But unfortunately, if things were getting better, we would not be in this position today. And we would not be here tonight speaking at 5 to 11. Madam Mayor, to summarise, how I see it is without changing things, we will not be getting an improvement. And this council needs to accept that their mismanagement and their mess across Merton highlights the failings not just by Veolia, but their own leadership and their own administration. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My wife and I moved into this borough in 1980, and it's relevant because last year, with all the black sacks on our road before this service came in, black sacks were being blown up and down the street, emptied by foxes, because we live in a very, very open area. And they must be descendants of the ones Councillor Ormer talked about, because in 1980s in Wimbledon, we were getting exactly the same treatment. So they were taught by the ones in Wimbledon, no doubt. But I'd like to ask the question. We've got black sacks into wheelie bins. Okay, nobody's saying there aren't loads of problems. But I asked you one question. If we abandoned everything that we've done over decades in this country after 4 months because it wasn't working properly, how many things today would we have gone without? How many things that we take for granted we wouldn't have if we just abandoned them instead of doing what Mike does, and that is work hard to make improvements to the service. And I didn't like the way Mike was attacked personally. I think that's wrong, and people who've done it should apologise. Thank you.
Councillor Simpson, please.
Madam Mayor, the glibness, yes, 17th and last is going to be the best. Not last but not least. Madam Mayor, the glibness on the benches opposite just defy logic. The fact of the matter is that they are delivering the poorest possible service to our residents in waste collection. A lady called Lisa, who lives in Thornton Hills, wrote yesterday to Public Spaces, still no bin after 5 months, and carried on with her email. The clerk, or the respondent in Public Spaces, clearly shares her frustration with the people that you've employed, Veolia, because she says, "I'm very sorry to hear this, especially as I'm sure I have escalated this to Veolia on a number of occasions. I have checked the system and we're awaiting feedback from Veolia as to why it's deemed to be done, containers already delivered. I can only apologise, but please do know I have escalated as an urgent again, and I will let you know once I get feedback." 5 months on. Email after email after email from this resident, and many thousands more around this borough. And this is down to your lack of management. It's nothing to do with government cuts. Forget all of that. It's all to do with the way you manage your contract. And all you try and do is the whole evening is to say it's government cuts. It's your absolute impossible way of dealing with things. You just cannot manage, and you appear, sadly, so glib you do not care.
Councillor McCabe, please. Councillor McCabe, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Earlier we heard references to Nicholas Parsons, and the suggestion was that there was lots of deviation going on. I suspect that if he was here he'd be talking about a lot of repetition. Why are we here, Madam Mayor? We're here because austerity has forced us into the kind of contracts that we and other local authorities up and down the country have had to sign. Councillor Kohler was absolutely right when he said earlier on that whoever was in power would have had to reach the same conclusion, make the same deal, and manage the consequences. Have there been problems, Madam Mayor? Of course there have. You can't introduce change on that scale without there being difficulties. Should we be rigorous with the contractors? Yes, of course we should, and we will, and we have. And I think that must continue. We can't let contractors off the hook. But, Madam Mayor, what actually happened? In my street, which I am walking up and down at 6 o'clock every morning, taking the dog for a walk before I go to work, what's happened? There is more food recycling going on. More people are recycling all the other things that need to be recycling to save our planet. there is much less rubbish strewn around the streets because the foxes haven't had the opportunity to tear the bags open and grab the stuff that they like the most and throw the rest away. And that really is the most striking aspect of this change. Madam Mayor, earlier on we heard that foxes know that Merton is the place to come for dinner. It's not true. Foxes are moving out en masse. I've had representations from Basil Brush, the quick brown fox, Foxy Loxy, fantastic Mr. Fox, the Fox and Hound, Fox on the Run and Fox in Socks.
Time, please, time. And last but not least, Councillor Making.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Conservative government has lauded the fact that there has been an increase in funding in schools, adult social care, etc., which I applaud. However, they gave schools an increase of 1% in their budget, but then charged them an apprentice levy and suggested that staff salaries be increased by 3%. How does that work? However, councils received a cut in their budget. Here in Merton, we had cuts of up to £70 million. I've been on the council for 20 plus years, representing Cricket Green for most of that time. My emails have increased slightly regarding rubbish, fly tips from 1 a year to 3 or 4. The streets within Cricket Green are cleaner than they were. I was against wheelie bins, but I'm a convert now. There are problems with Veolia, but I'm sure we'll get there. And Councillor Brunt is doing a wonderful job.
Thank you. Thank you. There are no further speakers. Councillor McLean, do you wish to use your right of reply?
Yes. Thank you, Madam Mayor. This motion tonight was about waste. However, there has been deviation, and across the aisle we've heard a lot about what we on this side called the deficit reduction programme. Let's have a little bit of a history lesson, shall we? In 2010, when the Coalition took over, the public finances were in a mess. We had suffered a financial crisis, a regulatory system that was set up by the then Chancellor and the Prime Minister before Gordon Brown that failed. It was the Treasury Secretary, Liam Byrne, that left the letter. There is no money left. Currently, we are spending £55 billion a year. That is the education budget and the defence budget combined on servicing the debt interest. How is it moral? How is it moral for us to be spending money so that our grandchildren and people that come after us have to pay that debt off? The tough decisions have been made by the coalition government and now the Conservative government. That is why we are having to reduce the deficit. It is down from 12% to 3%, and it is going down further. Now let's move on to the actual motion. The simple fact is that the enforcement of the contract, the management of the contract, is not happening correctly. I do not agree with Councillor Kohler when he said we should work together and simply looking at replacing Veolia as the answer. That is like taking no deal off the table. How can you negotiate? How can you negotiate if you're not prepared to take tough action? The fact of the matter is, the management from across the aisle is poor, and I agree with my colleagues, your glib attitude clearly shows that you do not care.
Thank you. Thank you. I will now call for a vote on the First Amendment, which is the Liberal Democrats' amendment. Can I have a show of hands in favour? Against?
I'm not voting.
Thank you. And those not voting? Thank you. Okay, we've got 23 for, 33 against, 3 no votes, so the amendment has been lost. So we now call for a vote on the second amendment, which is the Labour amendment. Can we have a show of hands in favour? Thank you. Against? Thank you. No voting? So we've got 33 for, 23 against, 3 no votes, so the amendment's been carried. So I now call for a vote on the substantive motion as amended. Can I have a show of hands in favour? Thank you. Those against? Thank you. Not voting? (33 for, 23 against, 3 no votes). So carried. Thank you. With no further business, I declare this extraordinary meeting of the Council closed.